I'm Jim Osborne, curator here at the Indiana Military Museum. And today we're going to feature yet another one of our most exciting pieces here at the museum, and hope that you will enjoy this presentation about, in this case, the German 88, the most dreaded artillery piece in World War II. Any Allied soldier could tell you without any question that the one artillery piece that was most feared, that was most revered by the enemy was the German 88. The 88 was developed before World War II, of course came along as one of the Germans' most primary weapon, designed as an anti-aircraft artillery piece. It ultimately found use both on the ground and the artillery, a dual purpose. It was even added into their vehicles, their tanks, the Tiger tank, the Jagdpanther tank, and became an all-around feared artillery piece of World War II. So today we're going to give you a little walkthrough about our German 88 and tell you a little bit about the features of the 88, why it was so prominent in World War II, why it was the most utilized artillery piece of World War II. And we hope that you'll enjoy this walkthrough and keep tuned with us for future presentations about other exciting and interesting pieces that we have here at the Indiana Military Museum.
During World War I, enemy planes were always flying overhead, observing troop movements, trenches, taking photographs, and looking for ammo dumps, anything they could take back to give their higher command. These would be plotted into a map, and they would use their own artillery to spot and shoot and try to destroy as much property as possible. Basically, you would have to send up your own aircraft to either chase them off or shoot them down. Small arms fire failed to bring down or even cause any of these planes to be damaged. That all changed on September of 1915 when a Serb gunner used a captured Krupp model 1904 75mm gun. He put it on a pedestal, he had it up at a very sharp angle and fired a shot, bringing down the first ground-to-air kill on an airplane. That shot alone went around the world. Everybody had to change what they were doing. In 1916, the German companies of Krupp and Ehrhardt came together and started plans for an 88mm anti-aircraft gun. Then what they did is they designed a cruciform platform. The gun had a pedestal mount. It was able to swivel left, right, and up, down, and it had a one-piece barrel. The barrel was good for 900 rounds before they had to be changed out. The barrel could be lowered at 3 degrees or turned up to 170 degrees. And since the gun weighed so much, it had to have a heavy truck and a flak trailer to carry it. The gun fired an 88mm projectile. It was on a semi-automatic breech, which basically means that when the gun fired, the barrel and everything would discharge to the back. It would go through a camming motion. The breech would open and the empty would be expelled outward, and that left the breech open for the next round. The gun was updated in 1918, and they began calling it the Fliegerabwehrkanon, model 1918, or just Flak 18. The original gun had a crew of 8, and they nicknamed it the Ak-Ak. U-boats also used the 88 in the war in the Atlantic to sink ships. They used an armor-penetrating round that was capable of penetrating 100mm of armor at 2,000 meters, or basically 4 inches of steel at 6,562 feet. During the end of the war, Britain, France, and the U.S. placed restrictions on German armor, aircraft production, and anything that was war-related using a set of sanctions. We all know how well sanctions work against anybody. In the 1920s and 30s, Germany started changing the propellants, the burn rate, and changed the projectiles that were used on the gun in the earlier models. The gun barrel was updated, as were several of the parts. They found out that the brass bands on the cartridges that they were firing out of the projectiles were wearing out the barrels prematurely, so they went to a sintered steel band on the projectiles. Rheinmetall and Krupp designed a much harder steel breech and chamber. which enabled it to fire higher, heavier pressures and heavier projectiles. And it used a two-piece barrel, which would enable the crews to switch out the barrel fairly quickly. This is the two-piece barrel with the breech back here. This was the center piece. There's the lock nut, and then you've got the muzzle. And that muzzle end is what could be changed out very quickly by the gun crews if needed. The original barrels that were one piece had 900 rounds before they had to switch. With the updated munitions and the two-piece barrel, you could get 6,000 to 9,000 rounds through the barrel before it had to be changed. These designs were done under the hiding of, no, it's still a Flak 18, but they called it the Flak 18 Type 36. During the Spanish Civil War in 1936, the Fuhrer sent arms, munitions, tanks, Army units, Luftwaffe using the new Bf-109, and also the Flak crews and their guns to help support with the anti-aircraft role. The 88 did a magnificent job at air combat knocking down these planes. However, during one of the battles, enemy armor was seen coming into view, and for fear of being hit by these armored tanks, the crews lowered the guns and started taking out the armor at a pretty good range. So as far as Flak crews, the Flak crews were safe dealing with the aircraft, but when it came to ground combat, many of the crews were injured or killed from small arms fire and also from bursting shrapnel around them. So later there was a metal shield that was added, and the gun was basically still the Model 36. And World War II started, and they found out that the shield worked very well for shrapnel and small arms fire. However, the 50 caliber armor piercing and larger rounds would penetrate the shield, so the flak and the stuff that was fired at them from aircraft was still a danger to them. The gun had a crew of 10. They had a transfer driver, a commander, an elevation gunner. They had a traverse gunner, 4 munitions handlers, a fuse setter, and then the loader gunner. A well-trained crew at the beginning of the war had 2 to 3 months of training, and they could shoot up to 20 rounds per minute. The gun was very accurate. The accuracy comes from the updated barrel design that Krupp and Rheinmetall come up with. It has a series of spiral lands and grooves in the barrel. There's 32 lands and grooves in the barrel with a right-hand twist. It is 1 in 45 at the breech, and by the time it gets to the end of the muzzle, it is 1 in 30. So it's an increasing barrel twist that adds accuracy. The shell measured 88 millimeter by 571 millimeter, and the projectile itself would fire with a muzzle velocity of 2,690 feet per second, or 1,834 miles per hour. There are several different types of ammunition for the 88. The anti-aircraft round is a 17-pound projectile. The tip was painted yellow. It had a timed fuse on the end. The fuse would be set, and it would detonate at a certain height, and it would explode, sending shrapnel out to 200 yards. Any aircraft or bomber that found itself within that 200-yard proximity would be shredded. It was a devastating round. Also, the Germans had the 16-pound armor-piercing round and the 22-pound tungsten carbide metal core. Those were painted black with a white tip. These rounds worked fantastic on armor. The 16-pound solid projectile could penetrate over 4 inches of armor at a 30-degree slope at 1,640 feet per second. There was also a 22-pound tungsten carbide. That would penetrate over 5 inches of armor at 4,922 feet, or 3.9 inches of armor at 5,971 feet. It had a maximum kill range on armor and light vehicles of 6,561 feet. This gun was devastating. It could also be used as long-range infantry support. They would basically use a high explosive artillery shell. It could be used at a maximum elevation on the gun. It could fire a projectile out to 6,250 yards or 9.23 miles. That had a very negative effect on all of the Allied troops, as these shells seemed to rain down out of nowhere, causing much destruction. Loading and firing the anti-aircraft gun, if it were in an anti-aircraft battery, there would be a crew to each gun. It would have 4 guns tied together. They used a Wurzburg radar. The radar would track the speed, the height, and the triangulation of the aircraft flying which direction. This would be put into the probabilistic calculator or the computer on the gun, which would go to a set of needles that are behind me on the gauges. These gauges then would pinpoint where the gun needed to be, so your elevation gunner and the traverse gunner would simply spin the hand wheels until it matched up with the needles on the gun, and then the round was fired. This worked out very good, and it had a great success ratio on aircraft. On the armor on the ground, you would fire the gun singly, and under the command of the commander, he would pull out and tell you what round he wanted yanked. The ammo handlers would hand it up to the fuse setter. Normally against tanks, the fuse was set at 0.11 seconds before it detonated after impact, and then the loader would load the gun and fire it. If the gun actually hit the tank that they are aiming at or the armor, the commander would call out Zielpunkt, which is hit or kill. If it missed and they needed another round, he would call out for another round. The whole process would start over. Early in the war, the gun crews were giving 2 to 3 months training to prepare for battle. But by August of '44, with the war winding down, lack of ammunitions, and lack of crew, that started to fall off. The accuracy wasn't as good. The crew were only getting 2 or 3 weeks training before they had to be put out onto the battlefield. So basically, by the end of the war, the crews were not even being completed. They didn't have enough munitions to go around most of the time. And at the end of the war, Krupp and Rheinmetall had produced these guns at a cost of 33,600 Deutschmark, or Reichsmark. And there were a total of 21,300 some guns made. So overall, the gun was a great invention. The Luftwaffe crews were the ones that crewed the gun at all times, using it against anti-air, but on ground, when you had Army units and SS units that needed to be trained on the function and firing of the gun, the Luftwaffe crews were in charge, giving that training to them. I hope you've enjoyed our program. Thanks for listening. Have a good day. Mach's gut.